Good evening, Brian. It's Friday. So in my last two videos, I talked a lot about how the internet is making us into better people. The internet is not all sunshine and rainbows, though. There are truly a lot of ways that the internet is actually making us worse off. Because so much of the collective knowledge of humanity is on the internet, it means we don't have as many opportunities throughout the day to actually think and use our figuring things out skills. In a lot of ways, using critical thinking skills is kind of like a muscle. The more often you have to figure something out mentally, the better you are at it. This likely means that not only are you better able to figure out similar things, but you're also just generally better able to think about things, to be able to mentally work out an issue from multiple sides and see all the different things involved. However, our brains are atrophied, and now we're so used to simply being able to Google the answer to a question that we're much worse at using the information that we do know to make an educated guess and figure things out for ourselves. I feel like because we so rarely have to use critical thinking skills and do this figuring out for ourselves, we're really bad at it now. Aside from simply being unable to figure out obscure things, which are faster to look up anyway, this can make our brains generally run slower. Because we're not used to critical thinking, we don't think. We're more likely to believe things that we should be able to see are incorrect, we're less likely to be able to analyze claims with a critical eye, and we're generally just dumber. This is related to another problem with the internet, and that's that we're really bad at estimating how common things are. For example, most people would probably say that rates of violent crime are actually going up. Things like murders, attacks, etc. But in actuality, most data shows that we're living in just about the safest time in recent history. The problem is that things like violent crime are high magnitude or high severity, so they get reported on and mentioned more often, people talk about them more often, and then they also stick out more in our minds. Because of the internet, we're constantly seeing a timeline of events happening. And so the frequency of seeing information on these kinds of events makes us think the actual frequency of these events has increased, when it really hasn't. Another problem is that because of the social media that makes us feel so much more connected to other people, we can actually feel worse about our own lives. Let me explain. Did you post any pictures of the Pop-Tarts you had this morning for breakfast? Or how about any videos of the way the tree outside your window looks? No, because all of those are everyday things and completely unremarkable, right? But that's the exact point. We tend to only post things that are special or out of the ordinary. Things like vacations, super yummy meals, fun accomplishments, etc. But because of that tendency, it means that the selves that we present through our social media are our refined selves. It's the best of our lives with none of the bad parts or even the mediocre parts. It's extremely skewed towards being positive. The problem with that comes in when we look at other people's content online, especially people we know. We often forget about this selection bias and just think that this is a completely neutral, objective portrayal of their lives. Then we subconsciously compare ourselves to them, and then of course we feel bad about ourselves. The lives we're living are normal lives. Sometimes great, sometimes sad. Sometimes terrible, sometimes awesome, but really often pretty boring and mundane. However, when we live that experience and then only see the distilled, positive, skewed lives posted online, we can feel pretty terrible and inferior. Related to social media is another negative aspect of the internet, and one that tends to happen more insidiously and with even less awareness on our part. Another kind of selection bias happens with social media online, and it's that we tend to surround ourselves with people who think like we do. This is pretty natural. You tend to be friends with people who think the way that you do, and you tend to start to think the way that your friends think as well. The problem with this means that a large portion of all of the things that we see online are things that we already agree with. They don't challenge us, they don't cause us to widen our worldview, and they make us think that everyone thinks the way that we do. This can be really dangerous because it means that the inherent biases and prejudices that we all have get reinforced instead of weakened. I don't think the situation is hopeless, though. The internet is a powerful thing, and civilization forever is changed because the internet exists. We just need to make sure to take a step back once in a while to make sure it's working for us and not against us. We need to stretch our critical thinking skills and use our brains once in a while. We need to make a point to make sure we have an objective view of world events. We need to realize that everyone's lives are just as exciting and as boring as ours. And we also need to make a point to constantly surround ourselves with people who are different from us and who think differently than we do, and make sure that we're always questioning our assumptions. Have a good weekend, Brian.